All right. Well, I am here with Adam Clark. Adam, my first question. Have you ever had a life-changing revelation? And if so, what was it and how did it change you?
That's a deep question to get going, Mike. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, uh, a life-changing experience. What was the outcome? I will take us back to October 2019, when I got hit by a car. Which obviously I'm still here and in one piece, which is the main thing. But for me, that was life. I won't get too kind of dramatic with it, but I was on a bit of a spiral in terms of my social life, I'll call it. A lot of alcohol fueled evenings, weekends, not a lot of staying present at home. And the night that happened, I remember it was on a crossroad, in the UK, and I remember getting the ambulance, driver, the medic, with his torch flashing in my eye. I was laid out unconscious on the floor, and then proceeded to get put into the back of an ambulance, was heavily concussed. My face had swollen quite dramatically, and I, in a very embarrassing situation, was sick all over myself whilst tied to a bed. I then got taken to the hospital and just felt a bit lost, I would say, at that moment in time, that moment in my life. And I think being heavily concussed, I've been concussed before through sport, but nothing like what I experienced then. And it started to make me reevaluate what I wanted out of life, where my priorities were. I've always been very career driven, often putting career before anything else. And that experience, it allowed me to just stop. I think that was the most important thing for me. I stopped, started to look at the impact on what I was doing to myself, what I was doing at home, and what I was doing to, my circle, and the people that support me. And it made me switch my whole mentality, be more present at home, do better for myself, do better for my now wife, and just be a good person. And not have to rely on anything like alcohol or like trying to overinflate egos just to, I don't know, it just don't get you anywhere. And yeah, that for me was the changing point where my focuses shifted. It shifted more into fitness. It shifted more into well-being and wellness. And it just helped, I think, prioritise what was most important and recognise what was most important to other people around me as well, to try and get some perspective. But I was concussed. I still don't think I'm 100%, fixed. But I was concussed for probably 4 to 6 months, with dizzy spells, with forgetfulness. So it was quite an impact that probably needed to happen, in all honesty. I always think, what if it didn't happen? Would I have stayed where I was? Would I still be going down that spiral? Sometimes you just need a hit in the face to actually recognise what you're doing and how you're living. And I'll always remember I walked through the front door of my house. My mum and dad had been called, so it was like 5 a.m. Mum and dad had been called. They were in the kitchen, so they'd driven an hour and a bit away. And Lauren, my wife, she was obviously there. My mum and dad left knowing that I was okay. And that was probably the first time that I've actually broken down in tears in front of Lauren. And we'd been together 7 years, I think. I just remember it just flooded. So something had flicked in my head, which again, that kind of stays with me as that moment of clarity, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. So it's still with you. Like at this point, it's not, I mean, that just sounds like it was so pivotal for you that there was no like going back from there.
No, not at all. Like I say, it's given me perspective, given me focus, given me, I suppose it gave me drive in a different way. Made me refocus where that drive should be.
Wow. And it's hard to go after that. What a way to start.
Sorry.
No, that was amazing. That was amazing. That is a life-changing revelation indeed. Yeah, wow. And I agree, like your point about how sometimes things just need to kind of come in and hit you really hard to get you on the right path. I've had those experiences myself, not nearly as dramatic as what you had, but I do think I sometimes find that there, maybe not with something like an accident, but there are ways in which those messages, it almost feels like a otherworldly spiritual kind of force at play. That's, like, okay, well, you missed the whispers. You could have responded back here when things were easier, but you needed the huge clapper over the head in order to wake up. At least that's how it's been for me sometimes. And so, yeah, I mean, those things I sometimes think, boy, you wish you didn't have to take your lessons that way. But on the other hand, when they do come that way, it is actually, oddly enough, a blessing in disguise, like you said. When I thought about my own life-changing revelations, although it might not have been the biggest one in my life, I had one where it was what got me on the path, which was I was going through a period of depression. It was like I was in my early 20s and in the kind of the depths of that era of feeling really, really low. I came to this realization totally spontaneously that really nothing on the outside was ever going to satisfy. That it was always going to change. There was always going to be something else to reach for. And that I had spent my whole life leaning into the future, thinking that I was going to cross some milestone that was going to make me somehow feel complete or fulfilled or happy, and that there wasn't. And it was such a powerful moment for me when I had that realization, because I think unlike just a mental knowing, like somebody can tell you that, but that doesn't mean that it's going to seep into your bones and your nervous system. But this was like a really clear seeing that was so potent, so potent, that it was like, Mike, if you do not recognize this and you do not change the way that you're behaving, you are going to be chasing for the rest of your life, and you're going to just be caught in this loop. And that, for me, I didn't know what to do with that at the time. It actually, all it led me into at that point was, okay, that was real. Like that was a truth that I just saw. Now what do I do with it? And I just had this little inkling like, okay, well, that means the root of all this is my mind. I need to understand my mind better. And I started meditating. So a lot happened after that, and, but it took many years for it to kind of unfold. But that was, for me, I would say, a really, really meaningful perspective shift that happened early enough in life that it led to some really important things that came later for me.
Nice. I think that, yeah, because that's all to do with recognizing it. And I think the hardest thing that I often find is when you win, that mindset, you just move on to the next, and you don't sit there and celebrate that, that win that you've achieved. And
right.
I think a lot of people are guilty of that. I am, because it is that, right, I've done it, right, move on to the next. What's next? Right, I want to be this, I want to be that. It's like, no, just, you've got the rest of your life. You don't have to complete things within months. What you've just said as well actually relates to one of the questions I had around going back to your 20s and what would you tell yourself? And I think that you've hit the nail on the head with part of what you were saying there. That's, you've got that moment of recognition and understanding to go, no, I don't have to be that person. There is, the full life ahead of you that you should enjoy and not see it as a rat race, just a constant rat race, because it does destroy your mentality.
And I needed it to happen that early because I am a slow learner and I'm 2 decades in and still learning the same lesson.
Well, that's the thing, you never stop. And I think as you develop, because I was going to say, let's go back 10 years and what would you tell yourself? But I'm like, really, the 20s is a time in everyone's life where you start to, I suppose, move into adulthood, start experimenting, start understanding your role in the world and how do you strive to move forward. I think in your 20s, you're learning. Do you know what I mean? And that's, you almost want to take everything in your 20s and learn from it moving into your 30s.
What's also interesting about the going back and giving your younger self advice is there's certain advice that's very maybe age specific. There's certain lessons you've got to learn at certain ages, but also a lot of times that advice that you would give your prior self is advice that you would still give yourself right now, which I think speaks to the fact that a lot of these things are so deep rooted. If you have a pattern, like I was thinking, if I was to go back and give my 20 something self advice, there are a couple other things that I would probably say, but a big part of it would be around, get off the society's path and get onto your path. Stop living a life that you think you should live because it's what other people are doing. And even though it seems easy to say that to my younger self from where I sit now, I could say the exact same thing to myself right now, because there's ways in which I'm not living congruent with my true self right now that I need to own up to. And so for me, I think it's powerful to ask yourself that question of giving your younger self, because there's a good chance that some of the things that you'd want to tell your younger self are themes that you need to hear right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with this one. What strength of yours was once considered a weakness?
This is a tough one. I'm currently trying to get hold of my emotional reaction. I can be, or I was more so in the past, quite reactive, emotionally driven. And that sometimes got me into more trouble than I'd have wanted. It also makes decision making very difficult and often incorrect. I'm now trying to understand where that emotion comes from first and foremost, to make sure that when I feel it spiking, I pull myself out of any situation that I'm in and actually look at what the outcome needs to be, because what I've started to do over the past 6 to 12 months is journaling and actually writing the problem down, or what might be emotionally charging me in any situation, and going back to it over time. So giving myself an hour, right? How do I feel? Half a day, 2 days, 5 days. And all of a sudden you start, retracting from what you're writing to get down to a tiny minute thing that's set you off over here. But actually, does it matter? Like, does that one thing matter to you? Does it matter to the people that it's affecting? Probably not. Like 9 times out of 10, I sit back and go, what was you doing? Like, why did you get so, like, emotionally charged with it? So I would say that, yeah, that's, I think, probably a weakness turning into a strength now, rather than a strength turning into a weakness.
And I think that what you're saying about the sort of the two-edged side of strengths and weaknesses is really true. There's often either a strength buried in overcoming a weakness, or there's a strength that's like the polar opposite of the weakness. Like, my answer for myself on this one is my sensitivity. So growing up, I remember actually I would always be told, Mike, you're so sensitive, or you're too sensitive. Like, that was a really common thing I heard. And I don't know that at the time I really even understood what it meant. What I heard was it's weakness, right? It's I'm thinking back to like being on the sports field. I remember when I think it was in third or fourth grade. It was like the last time I could remember crying before I shut off the ability to cry for like
Yeah.
a ton of years, because it was like I was too old to cry, and I got nailed in a soccer game, and I was like fighting back the tears, because it was like, oh, I don't want, sensitive Mike to come out in this moment. And what I now see with that is, first of all, more of an understanding of what it is. I don't know if you've come across the nomenclature of highly sensitive person, but there's like a bunch of stuff written about people who have these characteristics, these collection of characteristics. And what I now see is, yeah, it's got some downsides for sure, but then it also has some superpowers in there. And were it not for that sensitivity, my intuition is extremely high and dialed in. And I now know that. And I know that a lot of the work that I do when I'm interacting with other people, my ability to perceive at a deeper level, empathy, understanding of other people's situations, and ability to connect, those are all wrapped up in something that was a weakness that, for so many years of my life, I wanted to just go away. I wish that I wasn't that
Yeah.
way. And now I look back on it and I say, okay, well, no, you can't have one without the other. Sometimes your greatest weakness and your greatest strength are really two sides of the same coin.
You actually just lent into one of the questions that I'd written down around superpowers. We're very similar in terms of what our beliefs are around, like, from my point of view, it's like, I truly believe everyone has that superpower within them. They just might not have recognised it yet, or know what to actually do with it, and how it can benefit people, or it can benefit themselves, or, it's I suppose it's self-understanding and self-awareness first to do it, and then you can express it externally. And that's just, I think, I looked at that question from an internal point of view as well. But if I ask that outwardly to somebody else that, I surround myself with, they look at that and go, you're approachable, you're dependable, you're a good listener, you're loyal. So there's two very different sides to that an external person may see versus what as, yourself, your self-awareness, and what that can offer. Because it's quite an easy thing. It's an easy thing to ask, what's your superpower? But actually, to really create something meaningful, you have to be self-aware. You do need to pat yourself on the back sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And say, yeah, I am good at that. That is me. That is what, my superpower is. But we aren't trained to do that. Or we definitely are in the UK. Or again, general point of view, but I aren't as a person trained to do that. But, it needs to happen to allow you to progress.
Absolutely. And it's so helpful to have other people reflect it back to you. It's a big part of what I find in coaching work. So I'll be sitting across from somebody and you picking up on the fact that very often a person so frequently will be this incredible list of traits and accomplishments and achievements and life experiences. And I'm sitting over here just in awe of this other person and what they're capable of. And yet they're feeling like we all do at times. I'm stuck. I'm limited. I'm not where I want to
Yeah.
be. I have these weaknesses that are standing in my way. And that's what we're ostensibly there to talk about and to work on. And sometimes all that's needed, or one of the key things that's needed, is just having that other person who's objectively on the other side, who can reflect back to you the things that you have forgotten about yourself, that you are kick ass at this. You are so strong in ways that you are forgetting. And you've just, because you've forgotten that, you're not able to access that and use that to fuel you through this current thing that's got you stuck.
I'll go so you don't steal my question this time.
Sounds good.
Right, so this one is all around resilience. So when you're feeling down and out, how do you bring yourself back? And how do you build that resilience back up? Because it's not easy.
Yeah, for sure. My go-to is first to find somebody to help. The minute I move into that mode of finding, even in a small way, somebody to help, somebody to be kind to, somebody to perform some small act of service, I'm reminded of my worth as a human. And that often is enough like activation energy to get me out of that low point and to start to move forward. That to me is huge. I don't always go there first though. Interestingly, I think where I often go to, because I think that when you're in that place, at least for me, there's an emotional melancholy lowness to it. And I do also find a lot of benefit in just more like a physiological boost, which is fitness. I'll go for a run, go for a workout, just something to get me into a new state.
Going.
Yeah. Because in that moment, then it becomes easier to take action and create that beneficial spiral in the right direction. How about you?
So for me, I think I struggle to recognize first and foremost when it's about to dip quite catastrophically. So it's the recognition of it first. And once I've done that, I always lean into sleep, food, and training. If one of those three has slipped, generally the resilience will slip with it. And then for me, is giving myself time to understand the why, what it is. Because again, it's not going to be fixed necessarily overnight. And it's going, right, I'm going to allow myself time, but I'm going to communicate. So communication for me, I'm not great at, in a personal environment. And it's something that, again, is developing over time. But communicating that this is where I'm at, this is how I'm feeling, and being honest about it really, I think, helps those around me understand.
All right, I got another question for you. How do you see the concept of work-life balance as it pertains to you in your life?
It's a tough question, and it's a tough answer to really get right, because everyone's version of balance is different as well.
Yeah.
And something I always ask people is, what do you value most? Do you value money? Do you value a job title? Or do you value flexibility? You can't have all three. It varies dependent on whoever you're speaking to. But that then reflects in how the balance can come into play for me. But yeah, I'm probably never going to find a work-life balance, in all honesty. But I try and put things in milestones in place to allow me to do that. Milestones at home and milestones at work. How about you?
I struggle with it. Next question.
Yeah. It's not really a question, just from I suppose, a bodybuilding point of view, and leaning into Arnie. Obviously a figure in the bodybuilding world, just the world in general. I read his book, his 7 Ways to Be Useful book, a few months ago, and I think that one of his 7 points was around breaking your mirrors, and it was talking about perspective and not just focusing on your views. You lean into perspective of others to get a rounded off complete picture, to then allow you to make not necessarily the right decision, but a decision that is made together. How do you find perspective? Because sometimes it's quite hard to, obviously, you've got to take on board other people's views and understand why they believe in what they believe in, or why they think something should be a certain way.
And is your question with respect to how to live my life and making decisions, or is it just more in general? Am I seeking kind of alternative perspectives to life as like a way of being?
I think it's grown more into the way of being and bringing those perspectives in. If it's something you do, if it's something you don't do, it's certainly something that I haven't done, but I'm starting to do more.
Say more about that, and then I will answer you.
I think for me, like, I've been quite headstrong in the past, and I'm very, like mentioned earlier, like emotionally driven. That doesn't always get you the best outcome. And then moving into how you understand people, traits, characteristics. When I look at Arnie, I'm like, he was the governor of California for a reason. He didn't just make flippant decisions. The amount of communication he had and did. He had his little cigar tent in one of his complexes to hold these informal conversations. No one really knew why, but he was gathering information, he was gathering perspective, because he knew he couldn't do it by himself and just with his own thoughts and processes. It's so important, like, as leaders, and again, this has shifted a little bit more to business than general life, but I think it's how you build rapport, it's how you build an understanding of culture. Do you know what I mean? And different cultures that we're all living.
I haven't read his book, but I do find him really good at that. And just think about what he did back then. I didn't even realize how effective he was at working with people who had really divergent perspectives, and tackling things like how are we gonna make progress around, say, climate change, but working with people who don't believe that it's happening, and having a conversation where we can understand each other's perspectives and not have to have it devolve into what frankly is most of what's happening online these days. And certainly it's really, really potent in the US right now, this sort of divisiveness, and it's a real concern. And to be honest, I can see how there's a risk myself that where you create this filter bubble around yourself with the algorithms and the information that you're consuming and the people that you're following, and all of that starts to become an echo chamber. It's always amazing to me. I have all these go-to podcasts I have, and it's like there could be a concept I hear over here, and then boom, 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 boom. It's like it's on all of them. And I think, oh, you guys are all in the same filter bubble. You're all listening to each other, and it's all infiltrating your points of view and your perspectives and your beliefs. And that's fine. But when I notice that, it's like an alarm bell goes off that, oh, be careful, Mike, because it's really easy to slip into believing your thoughts and believing your perspectives as being objectively true. And the truth is always more complex and always more nuanced, and there's always two sides. And so whether it's in business or it's in politics or it's in my own life, what I don't do that I see a lot of other people in the world doing is going into everything thinking that I'm right. And I say it all the time when I hear other people who are talking about, oh, the world is crumbling because this is happening or these people over here are saying this thing. Like, do we really know that that's true? Do you really know that this is a net bad for the world right now? You don't know that. It's way too complex. And it doesn't mean that I don't have a point of view. It doesn't mean that I'm not capable of standing up for what I believe in. But I'm also much too humble that my pea-sized human brain is capable of knowing what's right. You know, I'm not God. I don't know I don't have the big picture perspective to be so confident that the stupid little thoughts that are running through my head are true. Is there a liberating thought or truth? Or actually, I'll ask it this way. What is the most liberating thought or truth that you have had?
I don't know whether this will necessarily answer it, but I'm me, and I'm not gonna change me. For me, like a liberating thought is, I'm me, you either like me or you don't, first and foremost. There's the good and the bad with me. I like to think there's more good than bad. But yeah, it's like, I am who I am.
I like that.
I don't know if that answers the question.
100%. Self-acceptance. I think we could all use more of that. You know, self-acceptance, compassion, kind of. There's this quote I love. I think it was Suzuki Roshi. You're perfect the way you are, and you could use a little work. That for me sums it up perfectly. Like, hey, I can accept myself as I am, and I can continue to work on myself. But meanwhile, I should accept who I am right now.
No one's perfect.
Well, this was awesome. I got a bonus question for you, which is I have to know.
Hang on, what's your liberating thought?
Oh, yeah, fair. Call me out on that.
Yeah, you aren't gonna get away with that.
Yes, guilty as charged. Try to just ask you all the questions and steal your questions. I think my liberating thought, something that I came to rather recently that was really helpful for me, which I think of it is kind of a spiritual thing, which is that there's no mistakes in life, that you can't make a mistake. And a lot of times we get hung up on, should I go this way or should I go that way? And these big decisions can feel weighty, like somehow if I make the wrong decision, life isn't going to work out, or, you know, it can become, we can get ourselves tied up in knots in that way. And there's this spiritual teacher, Ram Dass, once said, use it to go to God. But it was basically like, it doesn't matter. Use it for learning, use it for your spiritual path, your life path. There's lessons in everything. There's really no wrong way to do this thing. Even the stuff that's the mistakes, they're really not, in the grand scheme of things, anything other than you living your life and figuring it out as you go. And that to me was really liberating, because I think I had a tendency to aim for perfection and think that there was some ideal state that I was trying to get to, when in fact there's not. There's just life. There's this moment. You got to live it. You got to enjoy it. And you got to let that stuff go. So I got to know, my bonus question, why do you have an adult-sized Peppa Pig costume in your garage?
Oh, I forgot to mention that. If you ever want to rent one, Mike, you've found the right person. I bought that because it was my niece's second birthday. I'd paid quite a bit of money for it. It's literally, I've used it for 5 minutes because everyone got bored. So when I was looking to rent one to start with, and there was nowhere locally that I could get a Peppa Pig costume for. So now I was like, oh, maybe I could make a website and an Instagram to rent this out. And I did it. I did make my money back, but then it just stopped. I'm sticking to the day job for now, Mike.
The question is, why don't I have a Peppa Pig costume?
Well, exactly, because you should.
Because I should. Do you ship overseas?